drawing board coming soon?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing the Mars Attacks gave us was two really big things outside of doing a license. So first we've done a license, and we can turn up to anybody and say, you know, this was the license and that's what we did with it. And we're pretty damn proud of that. You know, I think the sculpting, the writing, the rule set are just fantastic, characterful, a lot of fun. We also got to test the one-piece plastic, and I think it's worked really, really well. I think, and again, you can just pick up and play, it works, but at the same time, you paint that up and it looks delicious. We also did the Jeep, the flying saucer and the robot. If anyone wasn't there yesterday, we still have those in the car. Okay, we're going to grab that. But I mean, that saucer is like a three-piece kit with the bubble over the top. It's just brilliant.
It was very nice.
Well, and you can see that you could have 3 or 4 of those as a squad, kind of belting in on every weapon, going in against, and so on a 6x4 table, zipping here and zipping there and moving around. And if you get, because we get a chance to literally write from a blank sheet of paper, we can write the system around vehicles. Whereas other systems have basically started with soldiers and then added vehicles in. And you know they get to a point where they crank and then they fall over. Well, ours can be written, just a notch up. So the top end of Dead Zone overlaps with the bottom end of Warpath. We've also got a kind of, as some of you may have read, we may well do a kind of Warpath battle firefight level rules, 40 to 50 figures, individual figures set. So if you want to still play those level of games, but the companies that may make those size games are no longer a company that you want to give your money to.
We don't know what
you're being a bit ambiguous.
You know, subtlety is my middle name. Not, you know,
squad level games basically.
yeah, squad. So I think you could then go Dead Zone, great intro, you know, particularly map based. Defined, you literally can play on your kitchen table. 2x2, with the scenery, with the soldiers, you can play on your kitchen table. As soon as you start into war games, you need great spaces like this. You need stuff like your scenery, trees, as well as the buildings and hills and all that stuff. Squad based, and then a bigger based game. We will not make you put your figures on bases. You may want to, and we'll write it so that that is an option. But we're not going to make you do it, because I think aesthetically some people hate that. You know, they just don't want to do that. There's others, you know, where the aesthetics are the least important part of it, and you know, just playing the game as, you know, if they could, they'd use cardboard tokens and all that. So, you know, but if you've got it right, there's that scale. But I think you'd have all 3.
Are you plan to keep the multi-dice system that we've become used to with like Dreadful and Dead Zone for Warpath?
No.
No.
And there's a reason for that, is that multi-dice only works for single figures.
Right, okay.
Yeah. As soon as you go back to squads,
right,
you need to roll, the squad needs to roll 10 dice. Each dice roughly reflects the firepower of the team. So you just can't do it, we tried it. But what we are going to do though is all of the kind of single, so you can already see that Mars Attacks plays, it's a different spin on the Dead Zone mechanic.
Yeah.
Which is really just a slightly more advanced version from Dead Zone, Dreadpool in some way.
Yeah.
Slightly different, it's back to the old Walking's Hole mechanics and Walking's Quest. You train your dice off, but even that was really the forerunner to Dreadpool.
Yeah.
So they've all got a familiar feel, but none of them are restricted by the limitations. But then I think when you go up to war games, we looked at it, but you just have to go.
So
This
10,
has the
10 men get 10 dice kind of thing. Yeah.
As a starting point, that kind of idea that this has that much firepower, otherwise it's going to be very abstract. I think there's something intuitive where we go, more soldiers equals more dice.
Yeah.
Bigger the gun, and just add dice. One huge D6. I rolled a 6, I win!
I mean, like differences to other games, I mean, are you still going with the idea of, you know, if guys died, you take physical models off and that reduces what the unit can do, or, you know, or do it like
No.
Kings of War?
I think it's going to be, I think, because what I'm just trying to remember, because this was one of the big...
It's a big bone, yeah.
It's a big bone condition, and
yeah.
actually the thing is, I know when you get it right,
yeah.
it feels right. I just know that. I've seen enough games developed now that if it feels right, it is right. You know, it's almost a circular argument. As well as all the time you're missing, until you get frustrated and upset. So we're not going to stop playing with it until it's right.
Yeah.
And when it's right, it will feel right. So you've got unit 40 and it's been battered, how can it be
as effective
yeah.
as you, yeah.
Whereas if you're doing them in little teams of 5 and 10, and it gets that save and it makes that leadership test, and you know it's still there throwing the grenades and putting the firepower out, and they're hanging on for one more turn, then actually in some ways it allows for heroic actions.
Yeah.
And if you do it right, and I played a game I think down at Epticon where the 2 dice rolls I rolled to get his general off was the first time he needed a 3 or more, or he was gone. So, you know, and I win this and I probably won the battle. So as close as that, we're right at the teetering edge, I've got so much troops, and I roll a 3. His nerve holds, that guy gets to come back at me, and I think we're having a bit of hero hammer here. He's fighting Taz. What Taz is he now, but whatever he's called at the time. And that mine stays. And he hadn't done quite as much damage, but mine stays, where he tapped one of the units and the unit went. And then I went again at him, did a colossal amount of damage, anything but double 1 and he stays, and he gets his double 1. And that's where, you know, of course he's on his last legs, he's nearly dead, but somehow they pull off that heroic action that actually goes on to win the game. And I think that's where, in good squad-based games, what happens is your leadership holds out, the leader holds that team there as a functioning fighting force for one more turn. And that's all it ever is.
Yeah.
Really what you're talking about is, you know...
Because I'm primarily a historical gamer, and this idea of attrition was annoying me because it's morale more than it fails.
Always. Yeah. And then, you know...
People run away, then they get slaughtered.
Yeah. It was after you broke that you... And then did they run you down or not? Yeah. You know, you can let the cavalry go or not. The cavalry was to break and then to pursue. And I think that's where, in this game, what it's going to be, there will be certain amounts of attrition because I think taking out hardware, tanks, and the things that can destroy you are the things that is where the attrition comes from. But how they go. So I think, I know it's a bit of contention. When we've got something we think people will enjoy, we'll show it to you. And I think the most important thing is that I think for a game it must feel right. It must feel, yeah, I can see that. I can see how I roll poorly and they're still there. Because that creates moments of drama. And that's what makes a great war game. And I think more so in a war game than in a board game. It's those moments where you pushing it, and if I get that 8, they're in deep trouble here now. I'm going to try that flanking maneuver, let's really go for it. And that look on their face. And that's how battles are fought, because there's all that pressure, there's the mistake, and he's doing that, how are you responding? And that's crudely why I don't like the rules to be too complicated, because it takes all that away. If all you've got is, I've got to remember to get that guy to do that point, and deploy that, and then that, and then you'll go, what's he got in there? It's the movement, it's the fight, it's the breaking point, it's finding their weaknesses in their army and exploiting it. That's a war game. It's recreating a... That's
what I'd like Warpath to feel. I'd like it to have the simplicity and speed of Kings of War, but not be Kings of War in space.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing. And
that's the balancing point for me.
It will be its own game.
Yeah.
And we won't stop until we get there. That's the most important thing. And we've made progress. I can certainly say between the last open day and then we haven't. Now, you know, we picked it up, we've started playing it, we are making progress. And at some point we'll say, okay, guys, what do you think about this? And we'll also have a squad-based game as well. So that just takes care of those that want to play that can play it. It's right
so
there.
A bridging game between Dead Zone and Warpath, that'd be good.
Yeah.
But an alternative. I think you can play both of them in the same space. But if people just like that kind of tactical squad-based game, here it is. Why not? You know, I'd love to speak to the ECT and say, maybe these are your official rules. We'll work with you guys on it. You know what you're doing, you've got no experience, let's work on that. And then let us make a game of epic scale.
Take us off track a bit. We've been told by one secret news last night, whilst you were here, the wallet, Kickstarter wallet of doom.
So, I mean, Kickstarter haven't been terribly good, to us. I thought, well, it's only fair and right that you make an effort, and so it's people think this is just a couple of pieces of metal held together with Alice bands, but it's not. First, it's cool, it's sci-fi, definitely. It can open bottles. It gets a ninja deaths. This is Kickstarter at its finest.
Ronnie,
Yes.
is that not like a cookery?
Huh?
The blade, once you draw it, you must open a bottle.
Yes. Bring me a Budweiser.
Of the vein bottle.
Kickstarter Wallet of Doom. Cool, any others? For you guys, who else is going to go?
Well, going back to sort of the Hero Quest comparison, one of the things that got so many people into Hero Quest was the fact that it was Milton Bradley was behind it, and there was adverts on TV, and you could buy it in Argos rather than Specialist Gaming. So, is there anything you've got to sort of push it down people's throats like that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is let's make the game, and the second thing is let's see if we can't fund it like crazy. Because, particularly in the US, success begets success. And if we go and do a really exciting Kickstarter in that space, and when I look at this space and I look at the core, okay, square in the middle, and you say that all good games start with the base game, so Wizards of the Coast, with Magic the Gathering. So they did a whole new, this was a new genre when they invented it, and they did Magic the Gathering, card game. And then quite quickly you get the spin-off version, the kid version, Pokemon. Yeah, you get the kind of Me Too version, like Yu-Gi-Oh, or the few of them that have been and gone, where you get the quick competitive. You then usually end up getting the comedy version, which is you get the rude adult version, Yeah, and it all spins off, and you get. And I think with the dungeon game at the moment, where you go, I think actually the interesting thing is it has the light-hearted manga style version in Super Dungeon Explorer. We've kind of got a really nice game with Descent that's quite an advanced kind of game that's a board game driven fantasy flight game. But when I look at the hero toy soldier on a board going down a dungeon, the archetype, I can't name it. I can't name the one that sits right bang smack in the middle. So what I want to do in this game is put it there, right there. I want it to be genre defining. And then to do that, it has to start by being simple. Because to go out and introduce people who don't play board games yet, and this comes back to that point, you've got to keep it simple to allow them the time and space to get into moving toy soldiers and rolling dice. Because probably the last, the other games that they've played to this point might be Ludo, chess, Monopoly, and Operation. Connect 4 battleships. How do you go from that to what we do? And if this is going to be Now, I think if this funds very successfully, and it's the game that we produce sits in that space, why can't teams advertise it? Why can't we go out there and talk to some of those people you've mentioned and say, look, this is a great game. This is a game that sits in that space, and we believe in it so much that we will take it into that space. Now, there's no point to you advertising it unless it's in Argos. Or Tesco or whatever. But unless you get the distribution, there's no point pushing it. But what that does is it does what HeroQuest does. It brings people into a hobby that half of them go, oh, that's quite good fun, I have a bit of a laugh. The other half of them come into places like this and start gaming and collecting soldiers and moving on to the next phase. And that's where I was working with the trade customers, and means that we have the channel option that absolutely. Now actually I think the US and Germany are markets more open to that kind of journey than the UK. Because although I keep asking, I'm closed out of some of the hobby stores. The length and breadth of this country, about 120 of them, don't seem to want my product. No, I'm advertising. Yeah. so you know, they won't let me advertising White Dwarf either, so I think that's pretty mean. But in Germany, there's a fantastic range of really great independent trade stockists because they have not been dominated by manufacturing with their own retail chain. America, even more so.
Do you look at bookstores as a company? Because bookstores now started selling board games. I don't know if they appreciate the miniature game quite as much as Kenny does, but if you've got an easy sort of pick up and play, almost miniature game, then it's...
That's a great point. So Locker we launched in the Notting Waterstones. We had a Locker night and we went down there. Mildly, people don't quite understand how much it costs to make good minis. Gamers do, but you go out into the real world, and but slowly but surely, you know, I was looking at Carcassonne yesterday, I think it was 28 quid, 30 quid, some bits of card and something else. So people started to get it. I think that's where Mars Attacks really could be a great product that will open more doors, you know, and it combines, and so that can nudge us, and then each and every time we can move out that little bit further. I'd love to do something with Waterstones. We've got Locker in there, did pretty well, but a dungeon crawler again could allow us to go to the next level. Maybe if we've got another big third-party license, that could open another set of doors. So I think the answer is, I don't think in one fell swoop we're going to be able to replicate Hero Quest and the success it had, but maybe in 5 years when we relaunched it, and there's a whole load more people that are then aware of the products, and we're better at selling the right product to the right channel. We're able to spec it correctly and get volumes, and you know, because we're printing 100,000 copies and it's going to go into Walmart, and we haven't given them 35 figures, we only need to give them 12 or 15 miniatures. We can hit a £40 price point, which makes it easier for the bookshops to sell. You know, I think we're learning all the time. The truth is, at the moment, our core customer base is proper gamers, and they want, you know, I want a 50 quid game, I want to be able to play it, I want the miniatures, you know, I want the whole 9 yards. Don't mess around with, you know, taking stuff out. Give it to me properly. And so, Mars Attacks has got 40 plus figures.
It's a good time to do it because you've got like Will Wheaton's board game YouTube channel. He's bringing in folk he knows that are celebrities who play games for fun.
Yeah. And the geeks who inherit the earth.
Yeah. It's literally the best thing to do as well.
Yeah.
That's a TV show as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's starting to change. You know, I think we've been doing this all our lives, and now our kids come along, and instead of our mothers looking at us thinking, what are you wasting your money on tonight?
It's the wives that say that.
That's why you marry one that likes board games.
That's difficult.
So, are you thinking about another outside IP then? Has anyone been talking to you about it, like Mars Attacks? I just noticed the way you said it. I'm going to ask that because you said it.
Have you got the tranquilizer gun?
Conversation here, chat there, you know, it's like, I'm spending a few days in Los Angeles later this month.
The look on his face, he says, say nothing.
There's nothing to say. We started talking, we're reaching out.
Oh, okay.
I'd love to do something because, you know, I want to bring toy soldiers to everybody. I love it, it's been my hobby, it's been my passion all my life. We're in a position now with the fantastic support we get on Kickstarter that allows us to make the games and the ranges that we want to make. I think, you know, the more core games you sell, the more add-on games you sell. That's never a retailer's product outside of proper gaming stores. They can't give them support, we don't know what it is. We have a few of the teams, but the bigger we make this hobby, the better it is for everybody. And, you know, I'll go with that one.
I stopped gaming for quite a long time when I was like out of high school in the early 20s, and only thought it stuff that doesn't last few years.
D&D, drinking games.
I've 40k D&D, but one thing that I never stopped doing was reading novels. Reading 40k cheaply novels. And it's one thing that kept me involved somewhat in the hobby was the fluff. Have you any kind of plans, thoughts or ideas about having anyone expand by writing novels or working on the wall?
Well, I think it's interesting. So here's the interesting thing. Who backed Dead Zone?
I wasn't allowed.
$100, PayPal. They never know how much money's in your PayPal account.
He sees the stuff coming in, that's the problem.
Get delivered to work.
Yeah.
Get delivered here.
Who downloaded the novel? Okay, and who's read it?
Started it, not finished it.
Yeah. And I desperately want to do books. You know, I think they're fantastic. And for sure we've got, so what we're doing now is in each Kickstarter, we do a,
Short story compilation.
now the reason we do two stories for two reasons. We did a novel in the Kings of War one. It's hard for people to write novels, you know, blinking hard.
It seems to me that that's also like another gateway for people that are into science fiction and fantasy, but you know, either don't know or.
No, and I think it's one of those, it comes that scale thing, because I think, you know, you're pushing on something that it keeps, I think it's a great easy step over for 40k players and Warhammer players to just start reading our stuff. Just think, well, you know, I'll read something different. I like that, but actually I'll read that. I you know, we all read stuff. It's a more, buying a whole new army and giving up a gaming system you've played for 20 years, pretty big decision. Picking up a 200-page book and downloading it on your Kindle and reading it on a flight, much more decision. Liking it, thinking, well, and so we've got a Dreadball Extreme book coming out. There'll be a load of Dreadball stories. There'll be good fun. They'll all be in the background. I've been meaning to play bloody Dreadball. Bollocks, I'm going to play that. You know, and you pick Dreadball up, and it just allows you to nudge along, and then you paint your team up. And all right, I'll play that tournament. And so I think it's a way of doing it. It's interesting. We did this fantastic book. That novel is just great. And it's a little bit clunky getting the download. It's a bit of a pain in the arse. I want yeah, exactly. But I wanted to go, you go, here's my Kindle, you know, Kindle store, shop on, download, thank you.
Please do that, because that's one thing you can't do.
Well, yeah, we've got a lady working for us now who's you know, that is one of her tasks right now is to get it up, but you're working with the Kindle and everything. Yeah. The iPad, the iTunes store at the moment is the one that's given us a nightmare, but we should be there because, as I said, until I can, in 3 buttons, have it on my Kindle, it doesn't exist. Yeah, it's not there. But it's interesting because I did exactly the survey at the open day. People love our novels, they want us to do them. You can go along and buy that book already on, you know, wargame vaults. But a lot of people backed it, want to read, love reading, actually quite got round to reading it. I said, well, it's the best insight to the Warpath universe. It's really well written. Each story is about, you know, a good Sunday morning shit length. You know, you can each one just covers the right amount of time, not be too long. So it's one of those things. I think it's so really what's going to happen is we'll get 2 or 3 more. We'll do the Dreadful Extreme one. Hopefully we'll get one out of the Dwarf King's Quest Dungeon Sagas one. And then we've got 3, 4, 5 books I'm really proud of that are nice. And the nice thing about short stories, you can work with different writers and it's tight enough you can edit it. You know, whereas when you try and edit a novel, any little inconsistency can really build into a big problem. It's a big undertaking. So we get these guys, they've got a nice selection of books. It's then going to be about saying, we have them, here they are, come and get them on your iPad, come and get them on your Kindle, come and read some of our stuff. So I think we're working on that plan. We're not quite there both from technology and from critical mass point of view, but I could definitely see, I think we had 42 submissions for the Dreadball Extreme book, and we picked the best 12. We usually do about 15, 12 will go in the book, and the other 3 can become, you know, a limited edition and free downloads, and so we just take a couple where it's not grown enough for the book, but we'd love to just, it's well written, it's well thought through, and it's actually IP, we'll let people have a read it. A lot of authors that we're trying to get going, you know, just love having something in print or having it, you know, available to download.
Cool. To go back to IP without giving anything away.
Yeah.
How do you go about, like in Mars Attacks, how does the team go about saying, you know what would be really good? I saw this film last night, let's make a game out of it. What's the process that you get from some guy has this great idea that he just keeps ranting on for a couple of weeks until you all give in,
Yeah.
to actually getting to the point where you would approach the company? I assume you don't just go to the company straight and go, can we make a game out of this? But you actually have something to show them.
Ish. So what we're doing now, there's two things. Mars Attacks asked us.
All right, okay.
They came up and they said, we love what you're doing. Can we do a game? And they did it after the Red Bull Kickstarter. Oh, cool. Feeling emboldened by Kickstarter, you know. Yeah. Well, let's talk. So we came over, we were in America before Gen Con, went down to see them. This was 2 summers ago. Got to have a really good conversation with them. Didn't know much about the IP at first, but obviously more read. I'd obviously seen the movie, but I didn't know it was based on a set of cards. Back in the 1950s, Topps made, or still do, baseball cards and basketball cards and that kind of.
They make the garbage pail kids.
Yep.
That's the only cards I've read.
Yeah, so exactly. That was to say. Back in the 50s, there was only baseball and basketball cards, and you know that was what boys and girls played. These guys came to them and said, "Look, we're going to make a series of 52 about these Martians invading Earth." First, it was one of the first, if not the first, commercially available sci-fi products ever made. Just post-war, America was feeling very rich. They were boomers, and they made these cards. The next thing that happened was, of course, they were quite violent. Yeah, things being shot apart, and it was a story of the whole humanity falling to these Martians. I don't know if you've ever read them. They're online. You can read the whole lot. If you just type in the original cards and stories there. Basically, it's about 48 tiles of humanity getting crap. I mean, literally, they're riding sheep around the White House and the house on fire. And it's destroyed. And then it's card 49. Humanity fought back. 50. We went to Mars and kicked the crap out of him. Humans win. So it's a great. The teachers banned them. Oh, these are shocking. These are outrageous. Poisoning the mind of our children. So instantly sales went absolutely ballistic, and everybody had to have them. So it was one of the first kind of commercially successful sci-fi products ever made. And so for the Americans, this has kind of resonance to Doctor Who and sort of Blake Seven, some of the stuff that we grew up on. That was one of their early ones. So we had a really good conversation with them. We could see quite quickly. Sometimes you look at great licenses, great IPs, but you think, how do I make a game out of that?
Is a great IP one that's just kind of vague at the moment?
No, so great. I mean, the two things with IPs, the first is there a cohesive world? Does the story make sense? So, you know, of course, Star Wars, Star Trek, all those big things that have had lots of people that have put products into them over a period of time, create a strong property. So let's give you a Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah, that's, you know, it's very obvious the storyline is there, there's a strong narrative, but if you ask me how I'd make a game out of it, I'd go, maybe it's a board game. Because I don't know how to make a war game out of it. Never really thought about it, I'm sure I could. We can come up with your vampire and zappies and things like that, but do we want it? Really? Do we want to see it? Yeah. Oh, yeah, and do you want it? Is that what we're going to do? It'd be cool, sculpt. Could be. So don't talk about it, otherwise we'll go, we could do that. We'll walk out like, remember the Buffy the Vampire. Brilliant idea, guys. So you can have good IPs that don't actually go into the game, but I actually saw this, it's about Martians. Very, very strong iconic image. Those great bubble helmets attacking Earth. It was light-hearted. It was, you know, random. There was mega over-the-top violence. Well, what's not to like? You know, how can we not make a great game out of that? It's a war game, come-scrim game. So it was really. It met, chatted, got on well. Realised that we could work with them. What they have is an art asset. That, you know, so where is it, Mark? Have you got? So, you know, our graphic designer, you know, normally has a few pieces of art and some photography, and he's trying to use it in as many ways as he possibly can. in this suddenly, we've generated this art and all our photography. Full spills a bit of water around that table. So, with this product, we've got page after page of art. So, because they've done it all for the cards. So they've got really nice art, comic book art, everything else. Then you had, really, I think, some of our best photography with the images and stuff. And you've just got this really robots throwing cars. There's lots of that. And then our flying saucers. I think Ben and the painting team, Martians on the sheet by Stonehenge.
I suppose it does go back to like the proper classic 1950s sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
That everything we've got now came from.
And that's where, so,
Like, I mentioned way back up here, my dad was driving up here, I was like, I mentioned him making March Nights. I remember they like some of those cars when I was a kid. And
yeah.
a 65-year-old guy remembers this stuff. So.
And I think what's nice about that is there's resonance for an older generation of Americans. There's resonance with all of us lot with a movie that we quite enjoyed. It was quite good fun. Yeah, it was fun. It's not like it's not embedded in our heads in the same way Star Wars was and what that meant.
You have got a dog with a woman's head sewn onto it, which is quite fun.
It was not tonight. And then actually what was interesting is, we do market research like other companies, because I just put it in front of a 10-year-old and he doesn't know what's mine and what's not, and they'll just go, oh, that's cool, or where's the Xbox type thing. And then when he saw this stuff, he instantly got it, because there's no doubting who the bad guys are. And it's an iconic image, and that's what's wonderful about this. I'd missed. I was thinking, oh, well, it'll appeal to us, being the old lot from the movie, and it's good fun. No. The kids love this because it's colourful, it engages, but it's also blinking clear who the baddies are. And then they, oh, I'll play the Martians. You could be the Marines, Dad.
You've made your rule book so it looks like a comic book as well. It's the same size, like a comic book, yeah.
We've done it, and I think it's 22 pages, so 44 odd pages, but really clear, really well laid out. So suddenly we've got this access to art assets. What's quite nice about this is we don't need to think about what weapons the Martians have, because it's defined. We know that the humans have M16s and what have you, so we can quite quickly just get straight into designing the game. Whereas when we have to design the IP, so when we're doing our Asterians, we're having a whole conversation about, okay, we don't just want to do elves in space. How can we make them ours? How can we make them interesting? And the fact they fight with a whole cipher army. Why do they need any elves? Well, they're not going to put many because they don't want to lose them, but they will put enough down so that they can spot and make sure they can see all the battlefield, because the scanners won't pick up all the information, so it's good information. And we're developing the IP at the same time as therefore one of the levels of the creatures that they've got, what armours have they got, how far do they fire, does that stack up with how we want that army to work, is it tough and fragile? You've got so much to think about, but when you pick up a defined IP, it is created. Which is great when you get started and as you go. The problem with them is there's humans and there's Martians. We've made half a dozen Martian units and so on, and Science Division, C Division, but it's not an infinitely expandable IP. Whereas Warpath is.
Are you going to do humans invade Mars?
Yeah, well,
humans attacks.
Exactly. Was it Thingy 49? We could do, the two things we could do with it is exactly that.
That was you, Ronnie.
It was on slide, on card 49, they go back up. And then we could do it in retro set. Go back to the 1950s. Thank you very much. So we do 1950s, do the old cars, do the old buildings, and, kind of get back in. Right now, there's a whole heap of fun to be had with this. There's 2 or 3 expansions coming. There's a few little.
Very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, and there's some pieces I'm sure we're going to deliver, and there's a picture of a
How big is the robot? That's what everyone keeps going.
Honking, I think.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
These are Martians.
That's the leg. So that's its knee is twice the height of a Martian.
Good grief. That's silly.
It's
You see how big
what
they are? Yeah.
Someone was asking on the Facebook page what the figures were made out of, what kind of plastic.
PVC. It's like basically, I mean, the interesting thing about plastic here is there's so many different ways it can be mixed. And so the names that they have are usually coded to the ends with numbers and everything else. We work with a guy who used to be a sculptor, who's our man, who's a French guy, who's just been working out there for a long time. And you can basically, you know, some of those awful things you get in bags for £1. You know, they're plastic toy soldiers. It's just how long they spend in the mould, how long you spend basically cutting the mould. So, you know, their drill bit will be about this big, whereas are thinner than human hair. And so, after that, what you squeeze into it, there's hard plastic, soft plastic, restic, the three materials we work in. The two we're going to spend most of our time working in the future, hopefully, is what we call hard plastic, hips.
Is that the high impact polystyrene?
Hips, hard plastic, and we're calling soft plastic. And the reason it's softer is you've got some give when it comes out to the tool. So, you see the tiles on the Dwarf King's Crest figures, because it's still just slightly soft when it comes out, you can get the figure out and then it'll set. Brings there, set. If it's hard plastic, anything that is not absolutely, so when you think of it, two huge pieces of steel come together, it sticks to one side. So come together, you squeeze the plastic in, one side comes away, it has to stick always to one side, and then the ejector pins eject it from there. Anything that, as these two things come apart, or when it's ejected, that overlaps a piece of plastic, firstly you can't get your cutter in to cut it. We're talking about fractions of millimetres. If it's catching, it will just break off, because it's hard by the time this comes apart. So, trying to give an example. If you had a tuft of grass, so if that's how that comes in the mould, the two pieces of metal come together. Come apart. If you had a tuft of grass here in the middle of his base, the metal would come up to there, and as it comes apart, that would break off.
Just remove that.
Would just flick off. So now, you know, it's of grass, it's tiny little bits of plastic, but if that catches, it just breaks and will break everything off that comes with it, because the steel is harder than the plastic. They're called undercuts. So the great stuff about this is the quality in the flat line is exceptional, and the material they're working is that kind of hollow material, but there's not 1 millimetre of give. So to get more and more detail, you need to break the model into more and more parts. And, you know, at the top end, I think that Kingdom Death is doing, you know, single piece figures in 12 to 15 parts on a sprint. Now, you can't have 20 models in a regiment to game with and 15-part miniatures. Firstly, you're not going to glue them together, you're not going to assemble them, you're not going to get them onto the gaming table, and at the same time, you need 20 odd sprues. So that's the trade-off that we're trying to do is, these are gaming pieces that we'll get out and play with, get a game and play with.
When you say soft plastic, I was thinking of the FX ones, which you can literally fold in half. Those ones are a lot stiffer than that. I noticed they only really, they give, but they certainly don't bend.
No, they don't. And that's where it's not a fair.
I like that.
Yeah, it's not really fair
Term.
to them. But I don't know what else to call it. You know, PVC sounds like it's like some windows.
Plastic.
You know, and it's definitely not that. But you know, and I was worried, you know, would the bases stand up with this warp or anything like that? But they don't. You know, they've really got a nice level on them. The detail is really clear. We started with locker stone. You know, that's what I'm talking about.
Just when you're talking about the bases, I don't know if you've ever seen, but Doom had a board game, and the figures were made out of plastic, and it was nice colourful plastic, looked like yours, and the bases were lovely and warped, and when you stand up, it's like having one of these clown things, so you just poke them.
Yeah,
It doesn't quite fall over, it just comes
Weebles wibble and they wobble, but they don't fall over.
Is that the same sort of thing? They would have used a soft plastic, but it would have been some different manufacturer and it's just warped in the base.
Yeah,
The model looks fine, just the base.
2 or 3 things. How much you spend on cutting it. So, you know, we spend a lot of money. You know, no one spends more. So in terms of cutting those types of plastics. It's how you engineer it. So by taking 2 or 3 millimetres or 1.5 millimeters out of the bottom of the base, the more plastic there is in there, the 2 things that will make it warp is very little plastic or a lot of plastic.
Okay.
And now you see what an imprecise is. Too little is too thin, and therefore it doesn't have any rigidity or strength. Too much, and as it cools, different bits will cool faster than other bits, and therefore it'll pull it this way or that, or it won't be completely solid, and therefore it'll start to move back. So, I think, do you remember our dwarfs in Kings of War?
Yes.
They've got a hole drilled out in the middle of their back.
What would be the pin I have to cut off or something? One thing?
Yeah, no, not the pin. Next to the pin, there's 2 little holes actually into the body.
Yeah.
And that was to allow it to cool quicker and uniformly. Because there was so much plastic in the upper part of the body of the dwarf.
Yeah, it's got cooling vents in it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, just less plastic. We actually put studs onto it so that less plastic was squeezed in, because that became not a cavity.
Yeah.
Is that one? Is that one?
There's a box of them down there.
I don't know. But hey, if you look at it next time we find us through, have a look. They're so thick, there's so much plastic in that upper torso. That we've pushed, there's actually 2 metal rods on the tool, the hidden areas, and simply less plastic in that lump. We've taken along as it's cooling. Sometimes you see some sinkholes and things like that. That's quantum of plastic.
You say like you like making games that other people can just come right in and go into for their first board game. Mars Attacks, with that being based on a movie, that's obviously quite mainstream. If you could pick any movie to make a board game out of, what movie would that be?
For me personally, or for that to come out to be successful?
Both.
The first thing is, I don't know if it'd be movies these days, much TV series. You know, I think the TV series are getting made are sometimes even better than the movies. The movies an hour and a half, but the TV series an hour. So, unless I say Castle, my kids are going to kill me. But it's not Castle. I mean, there's the obvious ones. There's things like, I'd love to do Star Wars at some point. I'd love to do a war game on that, of course I would. Walking Dead would be good fun. That'd be a great game. I'd do that justice right now. No Zombies are the best in the world. I think we make a game that could go on a map. So there's some of those types of things. I mean, there's a number of places that I'd love to go. Games of Thrones could be good. Terminator would be good. It's just not current at the moment, Terminator. It's one of those ones that I think, so I've got kind of like a premium list, they're current, they're live, looking around, and other ones where you go, look, that's it.
Pacific Rim.
I love Pacific Rim. And I think there's rumours, but if there's properly Pacific Rim 2 in the making, I think that would be a great one to do. So there's a whole load of fun we could have with, we could do big robots and big giants, and I think we'll push our tooling onto another level, and it would sit alongside. So, I mean, there's 10, there's 20 great licenses. It would always be sci-fi, fantasy based. That's what
Hellboy.
Hellboy, love Hellboy.
Hellboy would be great.
But we need a new movie, and that's where the TV series. It's also got to be in the zeitgeist. You know, I mean, this one we kind of went back out and plucked something fun. But unless it's, if we're going to talk about, can we get it from Argos and can we have it in there? Unless it's something that's current as well. But if it's too current, I mean, I was offered Men in Black 3 like 3 years ago. Do you want a license for that? I said, no. It's nice, but the window for a movie is so short.
Yeah.
Mark will have to sell it 8 months out. We have to have it on a boat. It has to arrive. 70% of movie merchandise is sold in the 4 weeks before the movie launches. 3 months after it launches, it's dead. And you think of a movie that you wanted to see 6 months ago. Couldn't wait, we're there at the opening weekend. How much money have you spent on that?
Guardians of the Galaxy for me as well.
Great. And I'm there, I'm the same. Guardians of the Galaxy is going to be fantastic. I can't wait to take the kids at the end of the month. And in 3 months' time, Guardians of the Galaxy was fun. When you're going to be walking around with a Guardians of the Galaxy t-shirt, buying the game, you know.
Probably us, yes.
Yeah.
Wrong
question.
Wrong crowd.
It's everybody else.
Yeah.
No. You know, and it'd be great fun. And if it might turn into a TV series, and then it runs, and then it starts to build, and yeah, well, Game of Thrones was advertised the hell out of on the TV series. Well, until series 2 and 3, Breaking Bad was season 4 or something. You know, kind of after the first one, so I was watching it.
Actually, a Breaking Bad board game could be quite amusing.
Take the book of depravity to a whole new level.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's a combination of this good IP, a current and ongoing product, you know, from the mass worlds, and we put something there, and that we can make a great game with. You know, some will tick 2 of those, but not the 3rd. And I think they're going to tick all 3 before we can say, let's have some fun.
Is there anything else you want to tell us?
Well, I think you plundered most of it out. The Kickstarters we're thinking about is Dead Zone 2.
Yeah.
Coming back into Dead Zone. That's very popular. We're really keen on that. There's lots we could do with it.
And you said like one race, but surely I can think of at least 4 that you put in it.
There is, but I think I'd start when I say it's going to be Dead Zone 1.5, not Dead Zone 2.0.
So not a new 2-player box or anything like that. More like here's
some more race, some more things, a whole new story. Use the models you've got, add something to all those 6 factions, take all those on, and that would be really good. While saving Zora against Corporation for Warcraft 2.0.
right.
Or Dead Zone 2.0, where there's a whole new outbreak,
Yeah.
and then the other stuff can come, but actually that would be a whole new narrative. We'd do whole new building sprues, whole new map, and come back to it. What I'm thinking is, no, wait a second, they've got maps, they've got buildings, they've all got book they've not read yet.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to go back and encourage them.
You're not getting any new products until you've read the book.
There'll
be a test afterwards.
You all need a nudge. We all need nudging. We all need to get really excited about something. You know, and I've just done that with the scenery. I mean, it's just properly hooked. It's there for ages now. You wanted to do it, but we're doing this, we're doing that, you're okay. Nick Williams is off. I said, alright, I'm going to do this. I'm going to bloody do it. And I'm loving it. I've got grass to take on the plane with me tonight, which is, I've got some static grass. Because I've got a few more days, I paint them, and I'm thinking, and actually coming back and nudging, right, here's the book, get it bloody read. Here's a chapter, read it. Now, here's the link, go and get the rest, get it on your Kindles. We've got to deliver that from a technology side as well as a
Just thinking about what you said about keep nudging the players, are you worried at all that Dreadball will be replaced by Dreadball Extreme? I mean, you just sort of kill off the players from Dreadball until you sort of start bringing out something for Dreadball again.
2 different experiences, they're compatible, just 2 different styles of game. Yeah, it really is. I've been playtesting quite a bit. I love both of them for completely different reasons.
And the interesting thing is, what we've done, what sometimes you do in a Kickstarter, is you tell our story that makes sense. When it comes to selling it through retail, or putting it in front of people, you can tell a different story. By that I mean this: Dreadball is the game. It's the tournament game. It's a 2-player playoff board game. It's great for tournaments. You pick a team and you play it. And there's no need to worry about, you know, that's my team, that's my stats, and that's how I can play. And that, I think, is the core. We've got 12 teams and we're going to do. What we've done with the Kickstarter is, so if you think of that in the centre, as the game, we expanded it with Ultimate, where you can't play that without Dreadball, and everybody knows it's the 6-player, slightly madcap, multiplayer, multi-wall version. And so it's not, people will play it tournaments, I'm sure, but it's not really what it's there for. It's there for beer, sitting down and playing, and we know it's not quite as an exact science as that, but it's kind of fun, and it's a great way with 5 or 6 of you to play and push toy soldiers around, big beer, tour nonsense. So on one side you've got these teams that it's quite important that although they're very different, they're exactly the same. Because they're balanced and fair, but each one has different character, and you can pick a team that you play. Over here we've got the multi-ball, multiplayer version. Actually, Dreadball Extreme is an expansion to Dreadball. It's a complete game in its own right, but I'm just trying to think for an example. But the idea is that you now play in 2 different ways, one of which is there's scenery and the battlefield changes. So if you think of a war game, a complete war game, you have an army, but you pick different units with different stats, with different magic items. There's a whole load of team selection. The slowly destroying. There's then the different battlefield you play on, different armies you play against. The Dreadball, the pitch is fixed. The only thing really that changes are the opponent's teams. Everything else, there's not a lot of selection in your team, because you pick a team. So quite a lot of things are fixed. So what we've done each time is kind of tweaked one of them out. So Dreadball Extreme is the game, the scenery changes and interacts, and it's slightly more madcap, it's a bit more fun, a bit more light-hearted. The expansion to that, and it really doesn't come through until the expansion, is that the sponsors. Okay. So you don't pick a team in the sense of I'm picking Mystics. For Dreadball Extreme, you get army selection. You pick a sponsor, you can get aliens very cheaply and convict scum very expensive. But if you want an orc blocker alongside a dwarf guard, alongside a Styrian jack, you can buy them. And each time you play for money. The money allows you to buy the players in the next one. So it becomes all about a kind of different way of playing. And I suspect you'll play it with a small group of you. It'll take league play on to a whole new level, which is one of the things in Dreadball I thought was good, but it's good as a squash league rather than a campaign. So your stuff really comes on, and your sponsor is where the money goes, and therefore how he spends it each time is defined. So, but the 12 teams are putting out 12 more teams for Dreadball. So they're going to get season 4, 5 and 6, because that will allow people to re-get excited about that game that we know that they love, and we mustn't offend them and we mustn't drive them away, which is pick a team, play it. And every time you play against a different team, you have a different experience. And so there's ones that are going to teleport, there's ones that are going to crystalline, there's all manner of different things that happen. We picked, I think, 4 for the gameplay aspects, 4 from the aesthetics, and then 4 from things that we wanted to do and kind of IP development ideas. So and each season's got 1 or 2 of those. So,
are you going to keep selling the Mars Attack team, or is that just a Kickstarter thing?
I don't know, if we promised it's on a Kickstarter, it'd probably have to be, but no, I'd love to sell it. I think it was exclusive. It was.
So, it was exclusive.
I'm certainly not going to, go back
that,
on a promise.
That makes 25 Dreadball teams, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's 12, 24, 25.
Yeah.
But they kill the state, the audience.
That's what makes it good.
Well, I paid the first one that I bought months ago.
I'd like to see the Z's play the Martians.
Well, and we buy up in the future,
Special player, Martian on the sheet.
yeah, burning cattle on the pit.
That'd be a giant, put all Bernie Cat on 3 deck space.
So I hope that it will give us 2 more years of support for Dreadball in those season books, and in each season book we'll give you 4 new teams, and let's look again at league play. Let's look again at sponsors and picking a team. There's different aspects of it, so each time we learn and the game gets bigger and better, and then when we come to look at it again at some point we can take all the best bits and put that We don't have to go down and where we do. So I'm hoping that we do quite reverse actually. People play extreme for a bit of fun and do go crazy with it, but at the same time the core tournament system, the core balanced game system continues.
Got any more quick questions and we can let Ronnie get his lunch?
Final one.
Keep going?
I don't want to overstay my welcome.
No, no, you're
a large fried.
Just don't want you to talk yourself down through ways.
I'm just wondering why you have a company called Mantic. Is it just the way you think? Is it just a description of yourself?
Manic. Has anyone looked it up on there?
I haven't, I've only just thought of it. So.
There's actually brilliant, isn't it? It is. Yeah. I'm trying to remember, I did actually look it up.
If you go and download it, then read it.
Yeah, that's right. Go down and read it. So, new way of thinking.
I will find out.
So they should be on Kindle.
On Kindle and the Amazon website.
Yeah, supposedly. We're waiting to put them up because we've been struggling to get the iPad one. You can definitely find them on the Mantic Digital app, which you can get from Purple Gorilla. But yeah,
It's not on the Play Store.
but that's what we're trying to find out. Let's find. Yeah, that might be the Play Store. So this is why it should be. You know, if even I can't understand it, Play Store. Mantic. But very, very soon, and you will see a newsletter about it. We for sure will let everybody know when you can go on your iPad to iTunes and to Google Play and to Amazon Store and download it straight into your Kindle. And that's what I want to do. And I think until then, until you're on the device that people read on, you're not really there. And so I can get them on my phone, but it was already too complicated for me to bother doing. I don't read on this phone.
I can't find anything on the Play Store.
No. Mantic Digital? No, fine. So, you know, you can see that it's not. I've got the Kindle up for this.
One of us, we can get a signal.
I've got the land password, so.
Alright.
Yeah, I'm
That'll probably help.
this as well.
Well, and so, you know, it's one of those things that there is ways and we get people to download them, and that's why when I'm mildly berating how many people, well, interesting, it was one, I thought that with the Denso novel, the difficult bit was downloading, because it was just fine, we send you a link and you have to go to the link and do this and plug that in and that. Interesting when I did this at the open day, about 60% of the people that say, have you backed Dead Zone? Yes. Have you downloaded the book? Almost all. Yes. Have you read it? I thought, well, you've done the hard bit. You know, you've actually got it on your device and they've gone through and jumped through all these hoops.
I think Kindle makes it a pain in the ass to get anything that's not downloaded from Amazon.
No, and I think that early on it's going to be tough for us because we give it away free to backers. And as soon as you say, look, $2.99, go and get it. As long as Amazon get their pound of flesh, 99p, whatever it's going to be, then they won't care. So, you know, the second way of getting that will be a lot easier. Here they are, go through their shop, and it will be on your device because they use their system. We all done, guys? Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming down and talking to us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much for your time.
That's where you got the door with the curtain.